who's now live for us in Kiev. Good morning to both gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, look, lovely to speak to you, Aiden. Lovely to have you in the studio. Like, look, you came to public prominence, front pages for quite some time after you were taken captive. You were fighting in the Ukraine war perfectly legally.
Yeah.
You didn't just think, oh, I think I'll just pop over. You were living in Ukraine. You joined up to the Ukrainian Marines, what, 2018?
Yeah, 2018, so like around like 5 years now.
Before the, I'm long before the invasion, and basically you were stationed at the front line in Mariupol when the Russians launched their invasion. You were in the Mariupol steelworks. We heard so much about that, that the people being basically pinned down there. And you, after a month-long siege, you were part of a surrender of Ukrainian troops, and you were taken captive at that point. Now, life had been pretty rough on the front line for those months beforehand, but then things went really horribly wrong, didn't they?
Yeah. I mean, after the 24th of February, in the build-up to the 24th, we knew it was going to be pretty bad, especially on our location. We're on the worst part of the country to be in for the invasion. We had Mariupol access. So we had the Donbass region, and then we also had to worry about Crimea. Yeah. So we knew eventually if we stay in this area, we were going to get caught.
Well, look, we know the Russians. I mean, their horrendous treatment of civilians, indeed of their own, Ukrainian soldiers, and indeed their own soldiers. Absolute total lack of care for anyone's safety or lives. Once you were a prisoner of the Russians, though, your experience, and your book is called Putin's Prisoner. You were a prisoner of war. You were not given any of the protections that would normally be expected in a just war such as they exist. What happened to you?
What didn't happen to me? I was in a kangaroo court, sentenced to death.
You're sentenced to death.
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
That was a pretty heavy blow to me mentally, and then you listening to all these people telling you all this evidence that's just been fabricated or exploited, and you're thinking to yourself where's the logic in any of this? And
did you think the British government were going to come to your rescue?
I didn't expect them to, obviously, because I'd been living out there for 5 years at that point, and
you're still a British citizen.
Yeah, I'm still a British citizen, but however, I did know that there was work on the outside. They were helping the Ukrainians to facilitate a prisoner exchange, because at the time the Russians didn't want to go along with the prisoner of war procedure.
Yeah, but we have seen prison exchange, which is how you eventually got out. When you were actually put behind bars, the kangaroo court's over, you're sentenced to death. Tell us what happened to you then.
So I spent the remainder until September in a solitary confinement cell. At one point, we had 5 people in a cell that was made for 2 people, 2 beds. Yeah. Some of the worst conditions that I could probably ever just say I've been in. There's no regard for human life there. You have a very strict regime.
And you were interrogated?
Interrogated.
You were tortured?
Yeah, tortured. When in the first month I was beaten unconscious, and then beaten again once I woke up. I got stabbed.
This is by Russian officials. Yeah. This wasn't other prisoners. This is by
the Russian proxies, which are controlled by Russia. Yeah. And then in the entire time that I was in captivity, they exploited me mentally, making me do propaganda. That took a very heavy mental toll on me. And then also when I was in the prison in Donetsk, that's where I witnessed another cellmate being murdered in the cell next door to me. So some of the worst appalling things I've ever witnessed, and that's comparable to my time in Syria, where I saw some equally worse things committed by ISIS.
Yeah, again, you'd fought there. It's absolutely extraordinary. Let me talk to John Sweeney just for a moment. He's in Kiev for us. He's recently returned. He's a journalist. He's also co-author of the book you've written together, which is Putin's Prisoner, My Time as a Prisoner of War in Ukraine. John, you've been covering these sort of stories. We know about the horrendous atrocities committed by Russian forces. This is a British citizen, interrogated, tortured, stabbed, sentenced to death in a kangaroo court. How did you find working with Aiden, and in terms of the impact this has had on him?
It was, in a funny way, it was a real pleasure, because Aiden's great fun. But he is a witness. He's a very important witness. And the other thing is that he does a proof of life video when he surrenders. And he's obviously scared, or just before he surrenders. But he's obviously scared, but his face is intact. Then he goes into Russian captivity. Then they hand him over to the Russian proxies. And 2 days later, his face has been smashed up. He's got a massive scar on his forehead. His eyes half closed, and he's been beaten, he's been tortured.
You could see this, yeah.
That video is compelling. And now, the Russians torture Ukrainian prisoners of war as a matter of course. But this video, which the Russians themselves put up, is proof that they tortured Aiden. And hopefully one day, the people who did this to him will end up in The Hague.
And that's, you say, it's crucial. He's a witness to this. I mean, Aiden, coming back to you, you seem, you come in, we have a little chat in the break. You seem, an ordinary bloke. You could have just been wandering in, from the shops. What sort of effect does it have on you to live in fear for your life every day, to be beaten, tortured like that, to worry that you may never get free, you may not live, may not be allowed to live, and to be treated in that way?
During my time in captivity, it was some of the hardest, mentally demanding moments in my life. I wrote in the book later on, in September, that I was so close to just committing suicide, just because I was fed up of being used for propaganda, and I honestly believed that none of that was going to end. So I was very close to doing it.
And then you were released.
Yeah, luckily I didn't do it, because 2 weeks later I was released.
But there has to always be hope. Now, your fiance is Ukrainian, Diana. You've talked about returning to Ukraine.
Yes. Obviously,
and people were thinking right now, you're crazy.
Yeah, I can understand why they would think that, but I think people need to understand is that life goes on, in Ukraine, despite the war, civilians there, they still have a life there. My fiance, she's Ukrainian. Her family lives in Ukraine, and for the past 5 years we've been living there.
That is, you consider that home now?
Yeah, that is my home. And
well, I just hope if you do go back that you do keep safe. I hope you're able to go back and it is safe for you to go back.
Thank you.
Aiden, I'm sorry we don't have much longer with you. It's been an honour to meet you. Incredibly brave man, and very lucky man. I'm so pleased you are here to tell the tale. It's an extraordinary book. Aiden Aslin with John Sweeney, live for us there from Kiev. They're both authors of this extraordinary book, Putin's Prisoner, My Time as a Prisoner of War in Ukraine. Thank you so much for joining us. 9:30 is the time.